And welcome on in to the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. George, it is great. It is great to be doing a game preview pod. The Richardson era is here. The Steichen era is here. I am so excited. I'm already hitting my microphone, George. Can you feel it? Football is back, baby. For real. Real football is back.
Game week, there's going to be a sold-out crowd at Lucas Oil Stadium. You got one of the best teams in the NFL coming in here. Week one and all the hope and optimism that you're going to have at their highest points that they're going to be all season long here week one. So it's always fun to go out there and see what the new team looks like.
So excited to bring you again another game preview pod. We will have friend of the podcast, Marcel Robinson, does a great job covering the Jaguars on the pod. Again, give us a kind of perspective on how Jacksonville is coming to the season. A lot of weapons, George, on offense. So it'll be a good test early on for this Colts defense. We will give you our week one predictions. We're going to throw the record book out. Forget last year even happened. This is a new year, George. And the good news is with our picks, we can't be any worse. We got like 3 picks right last year. So the good news is it is literally impossible for us, for the most part. I guess technically, mathematically, it can be worse, but we cannot do any worse this year. So we are destined for a better year here in 2023. Let's go.
We'll get off on the right foot. We'll get this week one pick right, and we'll set a new tone.
That is for sure. I like the optimism. I like the confidence there. So that is our goal here, to go 17-0 with our game predictions. Does that mean we're going to pick the Colts every time? If we were, actually, we'd lose a lot more than we would win. That's for sure. But either way, back with the game picks here as well. But George, we can't start the week one pod anywhere else. The thing everyone's looking at, the thing everyone's going to be talking about, Dallas Flowers and Darrell Baker Jr.'s debut, George. Let's go. The era is here in Indy.
Whole new era out there on the outside of the quarters. I feel like that's almost every position, though. I mean, I guess the wide receivers are back with Josh Downs thrown into the mix. Tight ends are back, and the offensive line is back. Almost every other position, you're looking at least one new face in a prominent role.
That is true. A lot of new here in 2023, which I don't think is a bad thing. But in all seriousness, George, the biggest position that's new, obviously, is Anthony Richardson. Everyone is going to be watching him on Sunday here. It's interesting because I want to start the pod by asking this question. Right, we did our season preview on Tuesday. If you missed it, check it out. Blue Horseshoe Podcast on YouTube and Blue Horseshoe Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Bright blue logo is our brand new feed where every new episode is uploaded to. And we kind of talked about, offensive rookie of the year. How would we talk about Anthony Richardson here after the season? But let me ask you this question to start the podcast. Sunday comes, Sunday goes. What would you consider to be a good, encouraging, positive debut for Richardson here in his first official game as a Colt?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because it's a tough challenge. I mean, they could be behind for large portions of this game. You're facing an offense with a lot of firepower. I mean, probably top 5 offense in the league this year, at least potentially over there with Jacksonville. And I think that's always a lot of pressure on the other offense. They never say it is, but I think when you come in, the other team's capable of putting up a big number. You're going to be pressing a little bit, and you're going to be pushing to match that yourself. And then, all the other trappings of this first start. I mean, everything he does, he's going to be doing for the first time in Lucas Oil Stadium outside of coming out of the tunnel. And that's the only thing he's ever done here. Or I guess running a 40, which, if he runs a 40-yard dash on Sunday, I suppose that's pretty good. I mean, that means he's had a pretty big game there. So, I don't think I'm looking for more from the run game. I think that's going to be more. I think a successful day for him is making a difference in the run game, whatever that number looks like, and using that to open up the passing game. And then I would say above 50% completion percentage. Again, I'm not going to get into attempts or yardage there, but if he can have one turnover or fewer, make an impact in the running game, and complete more than 50% of his passes, I think that I would consider that a good day for Anthony Richardson.
I like a lot of those bars because we are in agreement. I think, like I said, I just put a number out there, 58%. But I'm with you. I think one of the things that you feel good about is just, hey, he completes more passes than he doesn't. I think that's, like I said, attempts yardage just not really too relevant in this, in at least week number 1. And obviously the score, how the defense plays is going to dictate that as well. If you're trailing, you're going to pass more. But I'm with you. Like, can you just complete more passes than you don't? Can you limit the turnovers? Like, yeah, he's a rookie. He's going to make mistakes. But also, how do you bounce back from that? He did a good job in Buffalo of not allowing one interception to compound. Can that continue now, again, when the game actually matters? I know players won't talk about it, but preseason game, I think it's a little easier, George, to kind of move past interception when the game does not really matter compared to now, where an interception, if it leads to a touchdown, really could be, again, the difference in a game. And now all of a sudden you're looking at an 0-1 record versus an 0-0 record in preseason. But also, too, like, I want to see, kind of like we saw in Philly here, a few sustained drives. Can you put 4, 5, 6 first down together? Can you, limit the amount of 3 and out you go where the offense just sputters and gets no momentum going? And can you score? Like, I don't expect a high-scoring offensive outburst from the Colts here. I'll tell you, I guess, the exact point total when we do give our picks. But I'm not, I'll say this, George. I'm not picking 31 points for the Colts to score here in week number 1. But can you get down in the red zone and can you score touchdowns? Like, if you get the red zone, let's say 3 times, can you score a touchdown or 2? Can you convert more times than not? That's been an area in the preseason that's been a struggle for them, especially with rookie quarterback. That's an area where you think it was going to be a little bit harder. But whether it's running, passing, whatever, can you get in the end zone a few times and convert? That's like a few areas I think I'm looking for here for Anthony Richardson, where I don't think it's more numbers based. Like, I don't think he has to throw for 300 yards for it to be a success, but it's more, like you said, mechanical. Can you have multiple drives of 3, 4, 5 first downs in a certain drive? Can you limit the turnovers? Can you make an explosive play or 2? And can you, if you get to the red zone here, score at least 1 touchdown? That's a lot of things I'm going to look at where I feel like if he checks most of those boxes, George, no matter what the scores and the outcome, I think you'll feel pretty good about his NFL debut here.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it a little bit off the air. When you go back and you look at Andrew Luck's first game up in Chicago, I know he threw a couple picks up there. He ended up over 300 yards, I think, but it wasn't a great day overall. They lost to the Bears, and he turned the ball over a few times. And that one, I think, I always remember the Andrew Luck era starting with a pick 6 from Jarrell Freeman. So that'll be interesting to see what happens, out of the gate for the Anthony Richardson era. But Peyton Manning's whole rookie year really was not indicative of what was to come. He turned the ball over a ton that entire season, and I think those are to be expected. I think that's part of both those guys came in more polished, with more of a resume behind them when they took their first snap in Indianapolis than Anthony Richardson will here. So, that there's going to be dips and valleys, I think, is probably the easiest prediction to make this year.
I'm glad you brought up Luck and Peyton in their debut, because I think it's also important to contextualize that, where it's one game is not going to determine if Anthony Richardson is going to be a success or a failure. So just put numbers, because I did pull both here about Luck and Peyton. Very similar numbers, George. Andrew Luck, you mentioned, a lot of turnovers, 51% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 3 picks, lose to the Bears, 41-21. Peyton's debut against the Dolphins, 56% of his passes completed, 1 touchdown, 3 picks, they lose to the Dolphins. So, George, actually, I'll guarantee this. If Richardson comes out on Sunday, 1 touchdown, 3 picks, as long as he's healthy, fit him for a gold jacket. Let's go. Get his number ready to go in the rafters, and you got a franchise quarterback if that's how his start mirrors Luck's and Peyton's.
That seems to be the number to hit, right? 1 touchdown, 3 picks. We'll see. I think Jacksonville's one of those teams that you would, even if this was week 10, and Richardson had been playing for a while now and had seen a lot from NFL defenses, and this would still be a tough matchup. I mean, you got a team by far the favorites win the AFC South. I think some people are picking them as a dark horse Super Bowl. They're not a favorite to be, represent the AFC. But I think when people try to, okay, if it's not Kansas City, if it's not Cincinnati, if it's not, the Jets or Buffalo or anybody in the AFC East, is Jacksonville next on that list? And I feel like they, a lot of people are saying, yeah, look, they could surprise people even from last year and continue the way they finished and, carry that over to this season. That's a tough matchup for anyone, let alone a rookie in his debut. But I think they're that unknown factor is one element maybe in the Colts' favor right now, because Jacksonville isn't quite sure what they're going to see. And, that might be the one thing the Colts can kind of, at least early in the game, use to their advantage.
And on that note, George, part of the unknown is not only obviously the new quarterback, which, I mean, look, for the Jaguars, nothing new, right? I mean, how many new faces have they seen under center for the Colts now the last 5 or 6 years? So that in and of itself is not new. This playing style is going to be new for sure with Richardson compared to Phillip Rivers and Matty Ryan and even Andrew Luck and Brissett. But also on top of that is going to be a new head coach and Shane Steichen. That's another area, George, I'm excited to see. We have an idea. I think we know for the most part what this Colts offense is going to look like. But one area I don't think we can know for sure just yet, that I think we'll find out on Sunday, is how much is Shane Steichen going to run Anthony Richardson? We saw, I'll say a big change from week 1 preseason-wise in Buffalo versus week 3 in Philly, where the zone read was used a lot more, and we saw Richardson kind of pull it and use his legs to make some plays more than he did against the Bills. And now I think it's going to be interesting to watch how much does he rely on Richardson's legs to make plays, and how aggressive is Shane Steichen going to be, because in a year where expectations, again, for win-loss, it truly does not matter, this is the time, George, to be aggressive. We kind of saw in Frank Reich's first year in 2018, ultra aggressive, right? Highlighted by going forward in 4th down and overtime in your own end against the Texans that backfired. But you saw that specific decision galvanize a team and basically say, oh no, our coach believes in us. We love that. If you're Shane Steichen, I think being on the aggressive side as well to start, especially in year number 1 here, can kind of have a same effect. I'm interested in week 1, where, like you said, tough challenge, one of the best teams in the AFC, clearly right now the class of the division. This is kind of one of those games where, you know what, you got nothing to lose, in the sense that playing conservative is not going to win the game. Be aggressive, be bold. I think part of that's going to be not only, 4th down decisions going for it, but also how much are you going to use Anthony Richardson's legs to really push the defense?
Yeah, well, and I think, they're just going to pull a page out of IU's book and run the triple option. Jacksonville come in, and it'll be a whole new offense. No, I think
that will catch Jacksonville by surprise.
Catch everyone.
Wishbone offense, jumbo set, 2 tight ends, just bring everyone on the line of scrimmage and just who has the ball. I don't know.
Yep, just
old
run that triple option at them, and the old Navy offense right down the field. We'll see how that goes. Highly unlikely to see that, but no, I do think when we talk about using his legs too, I think that's not just the running game. It's having some design rollouts. It's allowing him time to navigate the pocket. I think one of the things he did best at Florida was step up, find that space to throw, and then get a 20-yard completion instead of maybe the 5-yard check down. It's one of the things I think he brings to the table, that it's why you drafted him. You want those defensive backs to have to cover an extra second or two, than they might if everything's just on schedule. So I think it's twofold with him. It's not just the run game, which he's going to bring that element. I imagine his rookie year, that's going to be his strongest element. I mean, that's just common sense. But I think also his ability to extend pass plays and to keep plays alive, drives alive, by moving around that pocket. He's already shown that he's really advanced in that area. I think even just in the preseason, you can see how calm he is in the pocket, how good he is at reading pressure, stepping up from it. I think that's a huge part of what he can do on Sunday as well. But I thought it was interesting when you talked about the balance, how much you run him and protect him. When he was listing his goals Wednesday out in front of his locker, twice Anthony Richardson said, stay healthy. And I think he understands his number one ability is availability. So I think if he's in that mindset, and the fact that he said it twice, to me, is an indicator that Shane Steichen's been maybe saying that to him a few times as well. But I do think that's all that means is you don't lower your shoulder into a linebacker. Go ahead and go out of bounds and save yourself for the next down.
Yeah, quarterback health, George, you could say the least, is definitely something not to play with for sure. You're right. Like, that's also a thing. Look, if you're gonna run them too, sliding, getting out of bounds, like definitely when you see it with younger quarterbacks, we saw with Josh Allen a lot when you're trying to prove a point. Hey, let me go fight for the extra 2 or 3 yards. Let me just go take on a middle linebacker and lower my throwing shoulder. No. Because like I said, if he's hurt and misses a good amount of time, 2023, George, is frankly a waste. If we're seeing 6-7 games from Anthony Richardson, or maybe he plays a little bit more, but he's not fully healthy, so his abilities are limited, in an evaluation year, with the quarterback obviously being the most important, area we're evaluating, you don't have a lot of Anthony Richardson. It's a wasted year for the most part. And it's frustrating. And it kind of does hurt your development here going forward, because it's hard to kind of know who's sticking, who's going, when the guy you're building an entire offense around is either not at full health or is missing a lot of games.
Absolutely. And like I said, he said it twice. First thing he said, and he circled back to it at the end of the list. And it's just telling me that the coaches have driven that home as well.
Speaking of players to watch and health, it looks, I know concussion is always tricky, George. I'm not going to sit here and guarantee you that Shaq Leonard's going to be on the field Sunday. If you're going to the game, you're going to see 53 back on the field in person. But it's trending towards, we'll say, him playing on Sunday and being back on the field this season. Look, I'm excited to see what the Maniac has in store. It feels like, and by all accounts you hear, he is in really good spirits this year compared to last year. And while maybe there's some rust to knock off, in the first game or two, it feels like we should be getting at least a 90-95%, Shaq Leonard back on the field, which still is hell for offenses to game plan for. I'm very excited to see 53 back on this team and see the juice he brings to this defense.
Yeah, that young defense too. I mean, a lot of guys behind him that are playing for the first time, or at least playing in this role for the first time. Getting a difference maker like him out on the field is just going to give Trevor Lawrence something else to think about and give them a chance against, again, what probably a top 5 offense in the league this year. Get Darius Leonard out there, and if Shaquille Leonard out there, and if he can force a turnover or two, which has always been his forte, that to me is one of the keys to this game.
The crowd is going to be jacked, right? Obviously, for the anticipation of Richardson's debut, first time he's going to be putting a Colts uniform on in Lucas Oil Stadium. Let me tell you, you talk about a roar. You talk about an eruption. If you get Shaq punching the ball out, forcing a fumble, or maybe even picking it off, and then a few plays later, Richardson converts that turnover for a touchdown. Oh, that 5 minutes, George, euphoria. It's going to be loud if we can kind of get that little turnover touchdown combo right there. Oh, boy. Oh, come on.
Jarrell Freeman had pick 6 to start the Andrew Luck era. So the bar is set for Shaq, for Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, whoever's out there to start the game. The bar has been set.
Oh, I cannot wait, George. I cannot wait. All right. When we do return here in the Blue Horseshoe Pod, let's get the Jaguars angle of this game. We talked a lot about it from, what to watch from the Colts perspective. Obviously, the big guy is going to be Anthony Richardson. But how are the Jaguars defensively preparing for Anthony Richardson? We don't really know a lot about how this offense is going to look. So what are they preparing for on how to slow down and try to prevent Anthony Richardson from having a memorable debut here in the NFL? Marcel Robinson, tremendous Jaguars reporter for Action News Jax, will join us here when we do return on the Blue Horseshoe Pod. Very excited to talk to Marcel and get the Jaguars perspective of what to watch for in this big Week 1 matchup. All right, behind enemy lines time, we welcome in a friend of the podcast, Marcel Robinson. Does a great job covering the Jaguars for Action Sports Jax. Marcel, it's been a while, but at the same time, it also feels like we just kind of talked last week. It's back already, kind of like the season never even did leave us. Welcome back, man. Thanks for joining us here in the Blue Horseshoe Podcast.
Oh, of course, absolutely. Always a pleasure to come on and chat with you guys about the good old Colts and Jags rivalry.
Even though it does feel like we just talked yesterday, it's been a while since Week 6, and these two teams have gone in totally different directions since that home game in Indy last time. Obviously, the Jaguars won the division and won a playoff game. And now also welcome in, Marcel, a big-time receiver in Calvin Ridley. This is where I want to start. This is an interesting one because he's not played right in a year and a half, but the last time we did see him on the field of the Falcons, he's really damn good. What have you seen from Calvin Ridley so far in training camp, and what can Colts fans expect from the Jaguars offense? Like, is he going to be definitely the number one guy come Sunday that Trevor Lawrence going to be looking to?
I mean, the best way I can describe Calvin Ridley is as advertised. I mean, the guy looks like he hasn't lost a step. I went to 90% of the training camp practices. I've seen him in pregame warmups, obviously the limited time that he's got in the preseason games. And, this guy is easily, I think, still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I mean, just his footwork is phenomenal. It's crazy when you watch. The Jaguars have a good stable of wide receivers after Calvin Ridley, but it's just crazy when you watch them go through drills. And you'll see Calvin go through a drill, and then right after him is usually Christian Kirk, who, by the way, is still one of the top receivers in the league. Definitely up there. But it still just looks different. It's just like whoa, this is what one of these guys look like. I mean, truthfully, I mean, Calvin Ridley could go down as already as one of the best wide receivers we've had in the city since, a guy like Jimmy and Keenan. And I mean, that's saying something. This guy, you saw the catch he made in the Dallas game, or the Miami game, the toe tap or heel tap, I should say. I mean, this guy's definitely hungry. We talked to him. He's hungry, ready to get back, and kind of silence the noise, so to speak. And he hates when you say shake off the rust because he doesn't feel rusty. But I mean, this guy coming to week one, I mean, not even just week one, just watch out. I mean, this guy's ready to play, and I think he's definitely got the potential and will put up big numbers all year long.
Kind of along those same lines, your quarterback Trevor Lawrence obviously caught fire along with the team. Last half of the season really made that fairy tale run to the AFC South Championship. People talk about year two jumps all the time, and I know there's year one, but we're not going to talk about that right now. But with Doug Peterson here and him having a year in Doug Peterson's offense, do you see that leap again for Trevor Lawrence happening this season?
Absolutely. I think the key word here is confidence. I mean, he's a guy that from a skill set standpoint, he's always had it. We've seen it since he's come into the league. The guy that we thought he was going to be coming from Clemson, he's shown the potential to have that. And coming into year two with Doug Peterson, I mean, the confidence level is just super high. But the best part about him is that he's still the same person. That's one thing that we noticed. And just talking with some of the guys in the locker room, they say that this is a guy that he's even killed, whether it's good or bad, he never rattles. And, just having the confidence and, of course, being surrounded by the weapons that he has. And of course, obviously that experience in this offense. I mean, this is a guy who's definitely worth the hype. I mean, getting a lot of love from not just here in Jacksonville, but all around the country about one of the guys that could potentially be in that MVP race. And, just complete unbiased opinion. This is a guy that is definitely has everything that you need. Like I've always said that, in terms of quarterbacks, when you're looking at the quarterback of your team, you ask yourself, can you see this guy winning you a Super Bowl? Can you see him hoisting a Lombardi trophy? And if the answer is no, or I don't know, then you've got the wrong guy. But that's definitely not the case here in Jacksonville.
So you mentioned Trevor Lawrence, right? We just talked about Calvin Ridley. You have Christian Kirk. You have Zay Jones. You have Evan Ingram. You got a lot of weapons, Marcel, in the pass game. From the Colts' perspective, their secondary is the biggest question mark, and I would say on the defense, the biggest weakness going into this game. Is Doug Peterson going to try, you think, this year, especially week one, to establish any sort of balanced run pass, or is this just going to be kind of like Kansas City 2.0? We got a great offense, pass the ball, and we're not even going to try to really, keep you honest running. We're going to throw.
I think, honestly, it's going to be one of those take what the defense gives you type of games. The good thing about this team is that they kind of embody the personality of Doug Peterson, and Trevor Lawrence. And it's not really going out there with anything to prove. Like, they're not really focused on going out there and, taking the league by storm or proving that they're the best offense, in the league. Truthfully, excuse me, I don't think there is a team in the league that can line up and defend this offense one-on-one at all. I mean, you talked about the names you mentioned: Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram. I mean, you can still throw in Jamal Agnew, who's kind of the Swiss Army knife guy. He gets there and makes some noise. You talk about the running backs, Travis Etienne and the rookie Tank Bigsby. They have so many weapons on offense. Problem is, there's only one football, but I think definitely the plan is to just go out there and just take what the defense gives you. I mean, if that means that if Gus comes out and kind of crowds the box, well, then we'll work on the outside. If they put a little more pressure downfield, well, then they'll run the ball. I think they have the flexibility and the versatility to do that, but I don't think the approach is let's go out here and show the league what we can do, especially because, coaches are usually kind of paranoid. So they don't like to show any more than what they have to. So if they can go out there and win with Trevor throwing the ball, 193 yards, then they'll do just that.
Looking on the other side of the ball in defense in Jacksonville, going back even, 5, 6, 7 years, during this streak where the Colts have never won down there, it seems like every single time they play Jacksonville is a highly physical game. And even in years where the Colts offensive line has been among the best in the league, Jacksonville's kind of dominated that matchup in the trenches. Is that a strength again this year? You feel like that defensive front is something that can be the engine of this defense?
I think if we're talking about the defense in terms of where their strength is, I would say probably up front, kind of definitely in the box. Of course, there are still some pass rushing questions. Getting after the quarterback has been in a topic of conversation, especially since they didn't really address it, heavily in free agency or the draft. So the hope is that the guys that they have, the guys from the end, Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker, they take that jump because they need to, and they know that as well. But yeah, I think definitely if we're talking about a strength, I mean, honestly, it might be on the back end. I mean, the secondary here is probably the one group in this Jaguars defense that doesn't have many question marks. I mean, Tyson Campbell is emerging as one of the top corners in the league, and in the safeties in Cisco and Andre Cisco and Rashawn Jenkins. So I think up front, it's all about the depth, truthfully. And they've got a couple guys. We're missing one, Devon Hamilton, who obviously is on IR, which is a big deal because he's having a great training camp, one of the big nose guys in the middle. But definitely that defensive line, if there is a weak spot, it could potentially be there in the passing game. Now, in the run game, they've typically been worked pretty well, especially with the linebackers, Foya Luakun, Devin Lloyd, of course, both guys who are definitely downhill runners. So the point of attack is the trenches is definitely a topic of, I guess, concern, for lack of a better term. But I think that's definitely been a focus that they've approached or they've definitely addressed coming into this season.
It's obviously, Marcel, not new for the Jaguars to expect a different Colts quarterback from year to year. It's been a rotating, cast of characters for a while now. So that's not new, but new head coach and a new style of quarterback that the Jaguars have not seen from the Colts in a long time. Shane Steichen tried a lot, I thought, during preseason to kind of keep a lot of things under wraps. So he did not really want to give any sort of tells. Has Jacksonville at all this week or even leading up to this game so far talk to what they expect offensively from the Colts? If it's going to be a big RPO, heavy game, deep shots, like if they kind of mapped it all out, a game plan of what they expect the Colts offense to look like?
I think they probably have the same view as most of the teams in the league. Like you just said, preseason, most coaches, it's pretty vanilla. They're not showing a lot. They're not, unloading the playbook. It's a very, standard style or playbook that they run. But I think when you're talking about the playing style of the players, with a guy like Anthony Richardson, who is, crazy talented, obviously playing at the University of Florida, we've seen tons of him here in Jacksonville. So that's kind of one of those things where some of the guys said that they may have needed to refer to some of his Florida tape, obviously, just to see the talent that he has and things he can do. I think you approach the game. I think you quickly approach the game with sort of a standard outlook as how you think the other team will be. But I think all of that quickly changes probably within the first quarter. I mean, after like the first series or two, you'll kind of get a feel as to what your game plan coming into the game. Is that something that's going to be, conducive for stopping that potential attack? But I think you have a couple things in your bag where you say, okay, well, we were expecting this, but now we're getting this. So let's quickly adjust. It's just that whole week one, you just never know.
You kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think it's kind of interesting. Right now, the Colts quarterback has played more games in the Jaguars stadium than he has in the Colts stadium. What is the view in Jacksonville? I mean, obviously, fans down there have seen Anthony Richardson more than fans in Indy have.
It's funny. Most of the Florida fans that we have here in Jacksonville, they're actually pretty happy for him. Me as a Georgia guy, obviously, I've gotten the opportunity to see him in the Georgia-Florida game down here in Jacksonville. And honestly, having a chance to meet him a little bit during his pre-draft workouts that he had down here in Jacksonville. Didn't talk to him too much, but just from being around him, he's all around good guy. I know I have a couple of friends here in Jacksonville that have, had the opportunity to hang out with him. They know him. And, while he was working out here in the city, he was, hanging out in the city, going, just kind of being amongst the community. Just an overall good guy, aside from that whole orange and blue thing, I can't say a bad thing about him. But I mean, as far as of course, the Jaguar fans that are Gator fans, they're rooting against the Colts, but I don't think you'll find a single person here that's rooting against Anthony Richardson, the quarterback, just because, overall, great dude, immensely talented. I mean, this guy's made some throws and done some athletic things that I've seen with my own two eyes that I had no words to describe. So I think I can speak for the rest of the Florida community, the state of Florida community, and saying that, we hope that, he does well and has a long career ahead of him.
It's funny, Marcel, we're kind of talking before the podcast, before I came on, like this is a different year for Jacksonville in the sense that this is the first time in a very long time where expectations are high and rightfully so. Obviously, that could do one or two things that could galvanize the team, but also maybe could put undue pressure or added pressure, and they kind of maybe sometimes wilt under that pressure, especially week one. Where's the team's mindset going to this game where this has been, like you said, you coming off last year, a team that a lot of people are picking to win the AFC South easily. but also a team that now people are putting close, if not in the upper echelon with the Chiefs, Bengals, Bills. Where's the team's mindset going into week 1 in terms of the pressure and expectations for a big year this year in Jacksonville?
I think it goes right back to the head coach. I think everyone is saying the right things, but I think they actually do believe that, expectations are just that, the outside expectations outside of the locker room and the building and the practice field. That's one thing that they don't really concern themselves with as much. It's really more so the internal expectations that they have inside the building. Talking to some of the guys in the locker room this week, that's sort of what they alluded to, is that, we're not really worried about where people say we should go, what we could do. We know what we can do because we're the guys in the locker room. They know that they have, there's no target on their back. They're not worried about going from being, the hunters to the hunted because they know what they have, and they just know the potential that they have in that room. They've seen themselves on the practice field, limited time in the preseason games. They know what this team is capable of. So I think the expectations that they have that they're living up to are their own internal expectations, in that they're not worried about, if Trevor goes out there and doesn't win, the NFL MVP, but they get to the playoffs and potentially get to the Super Bowl, it's not a disappointment because he's not the quote unquote the best quarterback in the league. They just have, bigger goals and aspirations as a team, and they know how far they can go. They know that they have the pieces to do it. So I think the expectations are more so internal than external, which is why I don't think there's much pressure that they put on themselves to go out there and perform to the best of their abilities.
And last one for me, the last time I can remember Jacksonville coming into the season with this kind of anticipation was 2018, coming off that AFC Championship experience with the Saxonville defense. What went wrong that year, and how do you think this year's team is different in that regard?
I think coming off that 2017 year, I think they had the mindset that everyone else is putting on them right now that they don't have. I think coming into 2018, they had the primetime games, they had the late games, they were on the national slate, everyone saw what they did. And I think that 2018 team probably was feeling themselves a little bit. They thought that, they could kind of roll out there and say, hey, look, we did this last year. Like, we know this is what we can do. And I think they took that approach into the next year and quickly found out that, it's not just about what you did last year. When you have, the good year that you have, your schedule gets harder. Not only that, when you're coming into the next year, you have a little bit of a target on your back, regardless of where you end up, especially when you come in with kind of, the swagger and the things that they were saying and how they were acting. That locker room was definitely interesting. There was definitely a little bit of a heightened sense of accomplishment, I guess you could say. When truthfully, now it's very much that it's the complete opposite. It's definitely humble. Like, they know that they're good. I mean, the Jags, everyone in that locker room knows that they have the talent on that team to just go out here and, do what Oregon did last week and maybe put up 81 points, right? But there's definitely a sense of humility in there. And like I said, I think that starts from, the head coach and the quarterback. I think they're coming into this year like, yeah, we did last year. One good moment, we were talking to Roy Robertson Harris in the locker room earlier this week, and someone started asking him about, hey, based on what you guys did last year, wouldn't even let him finish the question. He said, we're not even talking about last year. That was last year. That doesn't even matter. Like, this is a new year. And as cliche as it sounds, like, that's the actual mindset that you have to have. I mean, you look at some of the great teams that have been great for a long time. They don't talk about what they did last year. You think, Patrick Mahomes and the boys are talking about, hey, we won the Super Bowl, let's go do it again. No, you start over. And I think that's exactly what the Jags are doing this year. Yeah, they're being talked about everywhere. Yes, they're one of the top teams in the league being talked that way, being expected to be that. But there's just really no, hey, last year, legitimately, rearview mirror, doesn't matter, because if you go out there with that mindset of, hey, we're the best team, we don't have to worry about it, we can come out here and roll out the ball and win, well, we've seen that story happen here before, and because of that, I don't think it'll happen again.
Finish off, Marcel, only way we know how, with a game prediction. This rivalry has been very interesting in the fact that it's been a home team dominated rivalry. No, Jacksonville's been the house of horrors for the Colts. On the flip side, just one time since 2013, the Jags have come into Lucas Oil Stadium and won. Obviously, the expectations have flipped for most part. It's always been the Colts expected to win. This year, especially in week number 1, it's the Jaguars expected to win, 5-point favorites on the road. Is this a chalk game for you? Jags win and take care of business? Or is this, do you think this week adds another wonky twist in what has been a very weird rivalry, let's say, the last decade?
I don't know, man. I think, I'm all for, for a good twist in a football game, but for me, I just find it so difficult to see, just watching, seeing how the teams match up. I just feel like everything favors the Jags. Talk about, the coaching experience, the quarterback, the offense, defense, in terms of just what we've seen and what we expect. I honestly find it very hard to see the Jags not winning this game up in Indy. Obviously, you have to play the game, but it's very difficult for me to see, especially looking at the Colts roster and, like you said, the changeover with the coach and the quarterback and missing other pieces. And I think the biggest key is not having Jonathan Taylor. I mean, the Jags not having to face Jonathan Taylor. I can't imagine a better scenario for them. And it would be very hard for me not to pick them, especially because you don't want to start off with a loss, and that being a divisional loss to set you back even farther.
He does a tremendous job covering the Jags for Action Sports Jax. You'll see him in Lucas Oil Stadium on Sundays. Marcel Robinson joining us again. Marcel, great to have you back on the pod. Great to have football back. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Blue Horseshoe podcast.
Absolutely, fellas. I appreciate it so much. I'm looking forward to the hospitality of sub 100-degree temperatures up there in Indiana.
That we got for you. That much I think we can deliver.
All right, a lot of good stuff there, George, from Marcel. Let's go with, I think, something that he said that's very bold, but also I think very true. He was talking about how he believes no defense can match up with the Jacksonville offense in terms of all the skill weapons they do have. And boy, oh boy, George, not exactly the best start. Actually, I take that back. I think actually that's probably the best start this Colts team could ask for. When you have a lot of questions in the secondary, they are without a doubt going to get tested right away. And we try to see if there's any sort of balance Marcel could give with offense in terms of run pass. Like if Doug Peterson, he's a smart guy. I expect a heavy onslaught of pass attempts on Sunday. This is going to be for an inexperienced secondary and questions in the back seven, or at least back 4 or 5. It's going to be a very, very big test right away.
Yeah, I mean, this is Jacksonville offense that's going to test even experienced defenses this year. I mean, what Marcel said about, not being able to guard this team one-on-one, I think is true. You're going to have to try to scheme some things up. You're going to have to, if you double Calvin Ridley, then you're leaving Christian Kirk open. You've got Ingram over the middle. You've got Zay Jones who can work in there. Etienne can catch the ball out of the backfield. We've seen that plenty. It's a very big test, even if I don't care who you are. You could be the most experienced defense in the league. And I think Jacksonville week's going to get your attention this year. But in this case, it's trial by fire. You go out there right now with DJ Baker and with Dallas Flowers, and it's, hey, this is the NFL right away. And I know, the players will always tell you in these situations, every week they face good players, and they do. They're not wrong about that. It's a pat answer, but it's also true. I mean, these guys are all in the NFL for a reason. But I think Jacksonville's clearly a level up, even from when you're talking about every wide receiver in the NFL is good, and then you've got Jacksonville another rung above that, and then you throw Trevor Lawrence into the mix directing the whole thing, and Doug Peterson, who's proven that he can run some really effective offenses, calling the plays. Yeah, it's a massive test right out of the gate, and I think in some ways it is good because what have we been saying all year on the podcast? Literally from at least the start training camp, and I think even back to the draft, it's an evaluation year. You're trying to find out who can play and who can be a part of this team for the future, and this is a major measuring stick kind of game in that regard.
Without a doubt. And that's why, like I said, I kind of started by saying it's a good thing. Like you said, it is truly a trial by fire right away. You are jumping to the deep end. There's no waiting in. There's no, let me take the steps in and slowly work my way, get comfortable, get some footing, get some games underneath. It is boom right away. You look at the schedule, George, outside of Cincinnati, which I believe off the top of my head is week 13. So basically later in the year. So the first 3 months of the season, this is the biggest test the Colts are going to face. Obviously they play Jacksonville again in a few weeks, so they'll get it twice. But like, this is going to be the best offense and the biggest test they're going to face the first 3 months of the season. And so if they get torched, George, we're talking about a 38-17 sort of game. I'm not going to be that frustrated in large part because I think it's when you look at, again, the inexperience and the weakness of this Colts defense versus the strength of the Jaguars offense. you shouldn't go into this game on Sunday, Georgia, expecting this Colts defense to be able to slow down this Jaguars offense.
No, and the matchups are not good. Where Jacksonville is strongest on offense, the Colts are weakest on defense. We talked about the secondary, but the pass rush too. There's a lot of questions up front with the Colts. Can they get after the quarterback? Can they get him on the ground? We saw even last year, Trevor Lawrence getting rid of the ball quickly, not really being pressured by Indianapolis. Can they find a way this year to turn that on its head? Because that's the best way to protect that secondary is with a ferocious pass rush. And I'm sure that's how most teams are going to approach Jacksonville this year. Okay, we can't guard you one-on-one, so we're going to make you get rid of the ball ultra fast, and we're going to be in your face all day. Can the Colts do that? It's another big question. Can Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, and Dio Dangbo, Tyquan Lewis, can they piece together, a pass rush that is able to make Trevor Lawrence uncomfortable? Because I think even going back to when the Colts had, that high-powered offense with Andrew Luck, and you never knew, how many points he might put up in a given week. The way teams were able to slow the Colts down was always by winning that battle up front and getting after him and getting him on the ground and, causing him to maybe rush throws and make some mistakes. That's the Colts' only chance, I think, on Sunday, is to get in Trevor Lawrence's face and cause him to get off schedule. And right now, there's a lot of questions whether the defense front can do that.
I'm really happy you brought up that aspect, because I think you're 100% right in the sense that watching this game from the defensive aspect from the Colts, I'm more interested in the front four plays up front than I am the secondary. Like, again, I don't expect the secondary in their first game to play well and shut down all these great receivers and weapons Jacksonville has. But like you said, you look at this front four for the Colts going against the offensive line for the Jaguars, there is an opportunity for Kwity Paye, for Ebukam, for Dio, for DeForest and Grover up front to make some hay, because you look, Juwan Taylor, right, left in the offseason to go to Kansas City. Cam Robinson, their other tackle, is suspended the first 6 games of the season, or 4 games, or whatever it is, for PEDs. The top 2 tackles for Jacksonville from last year are not on the field week 1 this year. So that, if there is a crack in the armor offensively for Jacksonville, it's protecting Trevor Lawrence right away. So if you're the Colts, that's where I'm more interested to see how they play. Secondary, I don't expect to get, to lock down. Again, I'm kind of looking, because they match up with the Jaguars again in week 6, I'm more looking at the secondary in that second matchup, and then how they play against the Bengals later in the season, how they progress and grow. I don't expect a lot week 1, but week 1, especially when we kind of talk about the need for a pass rusher on the edge, especially to announce themselves to be consistent, this is an opportunity. We have Antoine Harrison at right tackle, Walker Little left tackle. This is an opportunity, George, with the offensive line for the Colts should be able, if they are as good as we think they are on paper or have a chance to be, this is an opportunity for them to kind of make a statement week 1.
And that's all year long. I think that's going to be a critical factor for them. When you've got a young secondary like this, the guys up front need to come up big, and they need to get that pressure, because if Lawrence has time, then he'll simply pick this secondary apart. And that's not just the rookies. That's all year long. I mean, anybody in this league, if they give Trevor Lawrence time, he's going to pick them apart with these weapons. So, I think the game's going to be won and lost in the trenches. And that's how it's been. When we talked about that with Marcel, that's how it's been throughout this entire series. Whoever wins that battle up front tends to win the game. Historically, the Colts win that battle in Indy, and Jacksonville wins it down there in Florida.
And now you asked about, the defensive line, which, like I said, has given the Colts offensive line fits now for a while. The good news going into week 1, George, the offensive line is at least is healthy. Will Fries not on the injury report. Ryan Kelly not on the injury report. So we expect at least the starting 5 that we thought going into training camp would be the starters. It looks like week 1 that they will be that starting offensive line intact, which is obviously good to see, that you at least have full health on the offensive line when depth is a major concern and issue. But outside of Anthony Richardson, George, that's probably the position I'm looking at the most. Offensive line for the Colts. Can you get some sort of push? Can you protect Richardson? Can you give him a chance? Like, Frank, that's all I'm asking for. Give him a chance to make his reads, go through the defense, give receivers a chance to get open. Like, this is, for how bad they were last year, obviously a lot of eyes are going to be on the quarterback, rightfully so. Clearly, that's the number one thing that we'll all be talking about after the game and watching going into the game. But outside of that, I think the entire team, George, number 2 for me is going to be offensive line. Can they shake off last year and just coaching which our Colts are banking on being the difference, truly be the difference here in week number 1?
Yeah, I think one of the things that Marcel mentioned too that I think was really, important is that Jonathan Taylor's not here, and that gives Jacksonville confidence, because I think the run game is going to be really important in this game particularly, but all year long. A rookie quarterback's best friend is the run game. I don't think anyone's shocked by that. I'm not breaking any news here. Every young quarterback, if you can run the ball, it can open up things for you in the passing game. Now, Richardson can take care of some of that himself. That's one of the reasons they drafted him. He's going to be a threat with his legs, but you want to limit that. That's one of the things that Shane Steichen talked about during the week this week, is that you got to find that balance. It is, as Shane says, one of his superpowers. But at the same time, you also don't want to expose them to too many hits. I mean, that's just common sense. You want to try to make sure that you use that as you can. And so you've got to find some combination of Deion Jackson, Zach Moss, if he plays, trending in the right direction. But we'll see. I would imagine he's going to be on a pitch count if he is out there. I mean, that's just common sense as long as he's been out. And rookie Evan Hall, can you get some kind of traction in that ground game? For two reasons. One, to protect Anthony Richardson, both from taking hits and to set up things in the passing game, but also outside of the pass rush, the next best thing to defend Jacksonville is to keep him off field. If you're not sacking Trevor Lawrence and you're not getting in his face all day, the other great part of that is that he's watching from the sideline as you milk the clock all day. That's another time-tested method out there. And the best way to do that, obviously, is to grind out yards on the ground and control that aspect of the game. Colts have had no luck doing that against Jacksonville recently. Last year, in the 2 games combined, 99 total rushing yards. They had 54 in game 1, all from Jonathan Taylor on 9 carries. Now, 6 yards of carry is great. Taylor, A, is not here, and B, they were behind that whole game. That was a 24-0 loss, and had to throw the ball anyway. So it really was, and some of that came in the 3rd and 4th quarter when Jacksonville, frankly, didn't care if Colts ran the ball, because their lead was big enough that they didn't really care. If you wanted to go on a 7 or 8 minute scoring drive, that was fine with them, at that point. And the Colts couldn't close that out because, as we know, they couldn't keep from turning the ball over last year. So, that's another factor, obviously, for Sunday that they've got to guard against. But I think even more importantly, the game that the Colts won here in Indianapolis, they only had 45 rushing yards, and Deion Jackson, and that's the one Taylor didn't play in. So I think that's why it's more relevant here. Deion Jackson was the leading rusher, 12 carries for 42 yards. He did have a touchdown, but what really stands out to me about that game is Matt Ryan threw the ball 58 times. That was that ultra quick tempo, no huddle offense. I will be stunned if we're talking Sunday night about Anthony Richardson having 58 pass attempts. They've got to find a run game, and Jacksonville has consistently choked that off from the Colts. And, when we talk to Marcel, there's questions about their pass rush, but they feel like they're, again, going to be a really stout run defense up front. A huge test for this team again. And we talked about how the Jaguars offense is going to really test some important elements of that Colts defense. Huge test for this offensive line and these, relatively unknown running backs compared to Jonathan Taylor in week 1. Can you do something against the Jaguars? The Colts really haven't done since probably the end of the 2020 season when they beat Jacksonville to get in the playoffs.
True. Run down that throat. You're right. Jonathan Taylor with a big, was it right? Over 200 yards, I think it was, in the final game to help kind of save what could have been at one point in that game, some slipping playoff hopes and have those go away. So I need your help here, George, because I personally am an optimist. I'm an eternal optimist. I always look at things, in a hopeful, glass half full sort of perspective. And this is a challenging season because we have tried, and I'm sticking true for the most part, to managing expectations, not getting ahead of myself. So if I'm getting too crazy, please let me know and pour some cold water on this thought. When you look at this game going into it, now I don't think the Colts are going to win, and I guess spoil my pick there for you. We'll give it to you in a second here, but we talked about defensively for the Colts, right? The one area you could exploit is the offensive line for Jacksonville and getting some pressure on Trevor Lawrence. That's really the only hope, but that should be a spot where they do have the advantage. On the other side of the ball, like the back seven for Jacksonville is really good. You got great linebackers. I know Josh Allen, and there's a lot of hype for Trayvon Walker here in year number 2 that he can really show why he was the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft. You have a good secondary. Like, the weakness, if you will, for Jacksonville defensively should be in that front four. And with how much money the Colts are putting in this offensive line, I know last year, again, was a total flop. But this should be an area where the Colts win more times than not. I'm not saying they run for 150 yards, but am I crazy, George, to think like the Colts should, when we're talking about this game on Sunday, should be able to win more times than not on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball?
I think that would be the hope going in, and I think that's their best chance of making this a competitive game, is coming out in the trenches and being the bully, being the aggressor. I think if Indianapolis wins on Sunday, I think it's going to be a combination of turnovers from Jacksonville. I think that would play a major factor in this, that they've got to help the Colts out a little bit in some way. And turnovers, I think, would do that. And a really big rushing day from Anthony Richardson. If he goes out and he has over 100 yards and they're able to control the clock and they're able to finish drives, then they've got a chance. But all of that comes back to what you were just talking about, the offensive line. I mean, if he's going to have over 100 yards rushing, the offensive line's got to do their job. As good as Richardson is, as much of a freak as he is athletically, he's not going to dodge 11 guys on his own. He's not going to be able to make things happen if they're not giving him any kind of time or any kind of lane. So I think that's the Colts' best hope, is that, as he runs and opens things up for himself, then maybe Jacksonville has to move up a little bit. Maybe even with this secondary as good as it is, you can get a deep ball or two past them because they have to creep up towards the line of scrimmage. I mean, to me, that's the game plan that really, bears the most fruit for the Colts. Get in Trevor Lawrence's face, get him on the ground, get him to turn the ball over once or twice, dominate the line of scrimmage, on offense, and control that clock, finish your drives, and maybe hit a deep ball or two once Jacksonville starts to be concerned with the run game. Those are all things we haven't seen the Colts do against Jacksonville for, 3 or 4 years now.
Hey, they did hit one deep ball last year. Alec Pierce, the eventual game-winning touchdown. I think the only pass Matt Ryan threw of the 58, that went past like 5 yards, it felt like. So what's in a blue moon? And we just had a blue moon, last week, 2 weeks ago? So, hey, crazy things have happened, but I'm 100% with you there in terms of, this offense. And the key is the trenches, and at least where Jacksonville has so many advantages going to this game, that should be, I think, the 2 areas the Colts should win on Sunday: offensive line, defensive line. Now, George, I don't know about you, I deleted the tapes, I deleted the records. So going into year number 2 here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod, when it comes to predictions, I don't remember a wrong prediction we made. Last year, like Marcel said, with the Jaguars going into this season, last year is last year, George. I don't care what the record is. We're going to pretend like that didn't happen. This year is a new year, and a new year, we're going to be getting some picks right. That's the energy we're going to bring here. So with that said, it is time for our official Blue Horseshoe Podcast Week 1 predictions. Jaguars at Colts. Jags, a 5-point road favorite here. George, the floor is yours. Just start the year 1-0. What is your official game prediction?
I'm going to go with a tie. No, wouldn't that be something if they back years to open the season? I mean, I think that'd be a lot of fun. That might be one of the most
2020 tie.
2020 tie with a missed field goal in overtime. But no, it would feel a lot different than last year's 2020 tie. That's for sure.
Yes.
I'm going to pick the Jaguars here. I think they'll cover. I think it's going to be, over 5.5. But I do think, I don't know if I think or I hope that the Colts will have some moments in this game that give you some hope for, the rest of the season, that they'll have maybe a good running day in there, or they'll have a good day getting after Trevor Lawrence. I think if you can get some of that to come through, Jacksonville, I think, is coming in here, and Marcel really, I think, kind of confirmed a lot of that, trying to prove that they're the king of the division, and that they deserve, all this hype that they're getting from outside and from inside their own locker room, and rightfully so. And I think that's going to carry the day. But the one caveat is it's bizarre world in week 1 in the NFL. So you never know what's going to happen. I'm going to go Jacksonville. Let's say 24-14.
Okay. You're right about that. This has been a rivalry where it truly has been upside down. The bad teams think, okay, no chance they're gonna win. Usually do play spoiler. I mean, again, that 2020 game with Gardner Minshew, they go 1-15, the only win that season that got him Trevor Lawrence. Ironically enough, week 1 against the Colts of Philip Rivers in a year where there was high expectations. I don't think, though, we're going to see bizarre world here. You picked the Jaguars by 10. I am actually in lockstep. I'll go a little bit higher, 27-17. Jaguars over the Colts. I think, again, we'll see some sustained drives from Richardson, and I think that's an area you can feel good in after the game of, hey, there was some positivity there. There were some good drives, stuff to build on, but in the end, Marcel said, I think he's right. Jaguars have a lot of weapons on offense. The only equalizer the Colts have is going to be the defensive line getting after Trevor Lawrence. I think they'll show some flashes and then get after him a few times to really limit what could be a 31 or 34 point outburst with, again, how good they are offensively, and the Colts, especially in the secondary, how many questions they have and inexperience they have. So I'll go a little week 1 rust, little Colts offensive line getting after Trevor Lawrence a little bit. 27-17, Jaguars over the Colts. Like I mentioned, they cover the spread, and they do start the season off and break their winless streak, if you will, and stop it at 5. So we are both from the Jags, which means, George, the streak is over. 2013, the Colts have not won a week 1 game. And now, since we're both on the Jags to win and cover, guarantee, lock it up. Anthony Richardson, we're going to put his name in the rafters here, or put his number on the rafters after week 1. A big-time game coming from him. It's a guarantee.
That would definitely be a banner. The right 13 game open, broke, what is it, 10 game opening week losing streak. I think that's definitely banner worthy.
Throws for 400 yards, week 1 versus Jags.
There you go.
Jim, we're doing the work for you. Let's go. Put the banner outside the stadium so the next time they're home, week 4, it's already there for the fans to soak up and enjoy. George, it's great to have football back. It's great to have actually a game that matters now on our docket. It's going to be, I think, a very, very fun post-game pod we're going to do after Anthony Richardson's debut. So make sure, if you haven't, now is the time. Blue Horseshoe Podcast, subscribe to YouTube on our YouTube channel so you can watch me and George's beautiful faces as we do chat with you. If you're more of an audio person, hey, as a radio guy myself, love that. Check out the podcast, Blue Horseshoe Pod. Bright blue logo is our brand new feed where every new show is uploaded. George, it is great to say game week is upon us. Have a great weekend, Colts fans. We'll talk to you after the game on the Blue Horseshoe